Let Daddy decide.
Which one is that, kiddo?
It is. How do I live without you?
So, who here? Because I didn't bring this topic, but I'm somewhat unfortunately an expert on this topic. Who here has filed bankruptcy in their lifetime?
Papa NASCAR.
I've got
NASCAR did. Okay.
I've got a conditional answer.
All
I actually visited a lawyer, started the process to file bankruptcy, didn't finish the paperwork, and by the time everybody caught up with it, it was too late and all the bankruptcy stuff went away.
I don't understand. What do you mean all the bankruptcy stuff went away?
So when you start the process, your bill collectors can't hassle you anymore.
Right.
And at the time that they were calling, I said, I've talked with the lawyer. We're starting the bankruptcy proceedings. And so now you need to talk to him. Well, I dragged my feet on filling out the rest of the paperwork because they wanted a complete inventory of all my assets, in the home and everything. And I was just like, oh, I don't want to do this. It was just a pain in the butt. So I dragged my feet. 3 years later, the lawyer said, yeah, we're not going to handle this anymore. So here's the rest of your retainer back and good luck. Well, at that point, all the debts had been written off by the companies already, and they had stopped harassing me.
Oh, so you filed partial bankruptcy enough to get them off your back, and then
you didn't have to go through the whole thing.
Officially declare bankruptcy.
Right.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Quite the loophole you found in the system.
It was weird. It was a weird time. And then honestly, everything that would have been a problem rolled off since then. Now, look, I'm kind of an idiot, so I got myself into a little bit more debt already. But it's a damn sight better than where it was. What about you, Charles?
Well, building off of this question, random kid threw in here. I don't understand how bankruptcy actually works. Are the creditors just SOL, which is a version of out of luck? And yes and no. So there's secure credit and unsecured credit. Unsecured credit, stuff like credit cards, those kind of things. Secured credit is where they can repossess something like your car or your house, or you put up your house to vouch for the loan. So even though the house wasn't part of it, it's called collateral. And then to certain points, all creditors, there's some creditors don't get touched at all. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, those kind of school loans don't get touched. However, hospital bills, those kind of things can be thrown out. So yes, I've actually filed both types of bankruptcy. And the first one was from dumb decisions and bad decisions and not managing my money well and having a stupid low paying job as a paramedic making $10.12 an hour in it was in the 2000s. In the 2000s, like my son was born in 2005. We filed bankruptcy right after he was born. So yeah, I was making $10.12 an hour. I was barely making $32,000 a year as a paramedic, but I should have managed my money better is the moral of the story. But did have some dumb debts and like young kids do. I was in my late 20s when my son was born. So, dumb decisions, but I filed, there's chapter 7 and there's chapter 11. And 11 is the rebuilding. And it's, you make payments and this kind of stuff. We wanted to keep the house. I needed to keep a car so I could get to work. So the car wasn't touched. The house wasn't touched. There was a second mortgage on the house that I'll share a story maybe in Patreon about how they stole from me on that one. But I had some hospital bills that had piled up. And it was not true bankruptcy because I should have gotten a second job. I should have gotten a better job. And I mean, I'd cut back to where I was working, saying, okay, I'm making 10, 12 an hour, which by the way, was about what I was making when I left the big city EMS job. If I'd gone to Atlanta, which I didn't want to do, I'd have made more money. But I could have done things to improve my income, and I could have managed my spending better. All that being said, chapter 11, certain creditors, if they don't show up to court, which 9 times out of, it seems like 9, they don't. And every once in a while you get a 10th time, I guess, and they do, but they can show up, they can argue why. I know my wife's mother filed bankruptcy at some point, and she told me the story of she had 2 creditors actually show up to her hearing and try to argue why hers shouldn't have been thrown out or included or whatever. I don't know what the results were on that. But that's chapter 11. And you do pay certain things. There's certain debts that do go away, but I had to pay a bankruptcy bill. So think of it like consolidating your debts, but way harsher. Like it was certain that the courts went in, yeah, no, that's out. This one you kind of need to do something for, but we're going to put it in a lesser amount. And so I ended up paying a bankruptcy bill, if you will. And I busted my butt. I learned my lesson. I was ashamed of it. I had to go get food stamps for my family. I had to do a lot of things that hurt my ego. And nowadays, I'll tell you, there is no ego. Do what you got to do to take care of your family. If you made mistakes and you can still put food on the table, do whatever you got to do. That notwithstanding, it was like a 5-year or 6-year payment plan, kind of like a car. We paid it off we paid it off a year early is what it came down to. And then they discharged it. Built up my career, built up my life, got a well-paying job, and you left EMS. After my son was born, I filed bankruptcy, quit my job, found an office job, finally made some good money in my life, and had built up to about $60,000 a year in the late early 2000s, about 2010s when I got laid off. So by about that point, no, 2010 is when I went home and I worked for 3 more years. So 2013 is when I got laid off. But I built up to about $60,000 a year, and I was managing my funds better. Albeit that Dave Ramsey is very controversial, and especially now he's kind of a curmudgeon, is a nice way to put it. But some of the principles, even though he might not have come up with them himself, they work. You baby step it, right? You put you get to $1,000 in emergency fund, and it was magic. It's a mental thing, but it was magic. All of a sudden, when I had $1,000 in my emergency fund, I had one emergency. We spent $800 to fix the car, or whatever, and still had money in our account, which was never before. Didn't have another emergency like that ever again. Built that account back, $25 a paycheck, built that account right back up, all that jazz. So you do that. Then we started paying off our debts that we had, highest one or lowest one first, because you take that payment,
snowball.
Blah, blah. Yeah, exactly. And there's other steps, but those steps work. Okay. Whatever you think about him, it's a mess, but those steps work. So I'd done that, gotten my life right, gotten my bills right, gotten my money right. And then I got laid off and went from $60,000 a year to $18,000 a year because I was hustling and scraping. And we struggled for about 6 months on the hustle. Like I got live event jobs. This is where all my stories from building stages for concerts and being backstage and learning all this stuff and doing stuff at 4 a.m. until the next 4 a.m. That's where that's the era of those stories. So I was hustling, and we had to make a choice. We could either keep our house and live where we live, which we had bought that house. We built that house. We could either keep it, or we could, and then I couldn't really afford to travel to where work was, or we could move where work was, where it's like a 10-minute ride. I'm not spending hundreds of dollars in gas every week or whatever. And that's the decision we had to make. So the only way to do that, and we tried. We reached out to bank. So originally, my mortgage was with one of the first big companies to collapse in the bubble because they did shady crap. Can't think of it now, but that was the company that gave us a loan.
Fannie Mae?
No. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were school stuff. They stayed around.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
This is a housing loan thing.
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of it, but they were one of the big ones that caused the bubble, apparently, giving bad loans to people. And they honestly, me and my wife made our house our priority, and I worked hard to keep our house. But we were on the edge of should we have been approved for it or not, to be honest. And we made it work. And then, so our loan got bought by Bank of America. They were good to us. We did just fine. Then for no reason, Bank of America sold my mortgage to a a loan collection, not that one either, random kid. It's a smaller one, but it's a bank, but it's also a loan collection place. So while I was not in collections, they jacked up my payment because of reasons I don't remember now, but they gave me reasons. I'm like, no, this is crap, man. They just made it unaffordable. But then when we were struggling because I got laid off, we reached out to them, said, hey, we need a building plan. We need to work. We don't do that. Kurt, I filed. And of course, it's like a ripple. You do not understand, everybody, how well connected the financial world is. I mean, we went to file and it went, and all of a sudden, the mortgage company's like, hey, we got you this letter. We'll work with you. Just fill out this 15-page form. Like, no, I called you twice, not once, twice, because I felt like maybe I just got an idiot on the phone. So I'll try again because I want to do the right thing. I want to keep this house that was my wife's dream. She designed this house. She had all 4 of the kids in this house. I'm going to keep this house. Nope, nothing. So, like you said, Kurt, we filed SunTrust. SunTrust literally tried to steal money from me, and I had to tell them to put it back because, like, this is your problem. This is why things are bad. Is there's literally $8 in that account, which is why I am filing bankruptcy. And you just did your ones and zeros and pulled out $800 that wasn't real, and you took that and then nailed me with penalties. I might just let that dude have it. Yep. And then I said, then put it back. Put my $2 back or $8, whatever it was. Put it back because here's my lawyer. Here's my filing number. You're stupid. And then I hung up on him and I got my $8 back and they were stupid. So they're not just SOL. So I filed chapter 7 the second time, that time when we had to move out of the house. And that meant we were willingly turning over the house. You know, we have to leave the house. It's not going to be ours anymore. We kept the car because you need a car to get to and from work. So there's certain things you can say, okay, no, I'm making these payments. I'll do my best to keep this. But the courts try to make sure you have food on your table, roof over your house, a roof over your head, and a car to get to work. Or you know, that you have some kind of, okay, you live in town and you can walk to work, something, right?
Yeah, if you have 2 cars, you usually have to get rid of the second one. But they will let you keep they'll let you keep the cheaper car.
Yeah,
is usually what that works out to. So.
In our case, I had a beater. I mean, it was, we call it the ghetto sled. It was a $750 car. That's what I bought, and then I put $1,000 in to get CV boots and make it run, and that's it. And then we had a car that we had been making great payments on. It was a very small payment, and my wife was trying to work. I said, no, we have to have something for the kids to get to and from, and then I go to work all the time. Actually, no, the beater was gone. I had an old motorcycle. So that's what I had to drive, rain or shine. That was my car. That was not fun sometimes. So that's how you handle it in a nutshell. I'm sure there's other questions, other thought processes, but I will tell you what Kurt says, right? The second you go to file. Now, let me tell you, before I tell you that, let me tell you this. If you're thinking about filing bankruptcy, find some independent financial counselors. Talk to them. Do not call the debt consolidation company first. Do not call the bankruptcy lawyer first, because the adage is, to a carpenter or to the hammer, everything in life is a nail. You go to a bankruptcy lawyer and go, hey, I'm struggling. What should I do? They're going to tell you file bankruptcy. Oh, and they got their $1,200. It was not a lot of money, but they got theirs first. And then same with the debt consolidation. That's what they do. So they're going to tell you to consolidate. So if you find an independent counselor, figure out, I mean, I know money's a thing. Obviously, you wouldn't be struggling here, but you figure out how you can get that advice. And then you look at your life, because if I really had somebody virtually slap me upside my face the first time, like, you don't have a bankruptcy problem. You have a spending problem, moron. Go get a second job or a third or a bigger job. You don't get to afford to say, I'm not gonna, or I don't want to. You need to get your butt out there and do it. And hey, dummy, this big Dodge 1500 truck that you bought for no reason, yeah, you need to sell that, not turn it back over. You need to sell it and then pay it off as best you can, and then figure out how to work out those. I mean, there's so many things I could have done the first time. Second time was legit zero income, and it was very difficult to find a job that would pay for my family. I mean, this is the era. I don't know if y'all have heard these stories. This is the era that I ended up going to work at Publix at the deli because I wanted to prove my, because she was just saying any job will do. And I was like, that's any job will not do. I mean, I know you understand the bills, but you're being very emotional right now. Any job won't do. So I'm trying to keep the house. I'm driving 45 minutes up the road to go work at a deli, which is no big deal. You do what you gotta do. I was happy. I'm Mr. Customer Service. And yet they put my 6'7" butt on washing dishes every night. I'm not too proud to wash dishes. I am too tall to wash dishes because those work sinks were below my waistline, which actually, by OSHA standards, I shouldn't have been doing because now I'm humped over and it's a bad position, all that stuff. But yet there's stuff way up high. Guess who? Kurt and Joe. Just guess who they put on putting up the high stuff and getting down the high stuff and lifting the heavy stuff.
Aaron.
Close enough. Yes, a small little girl, right? And some of the people are smart enough to go, look, let's just trade. You shouldn't be doing dishes, and I don't need to be lifting this grease trap and climbing on ladders up here when you just reach it. Yeah, it was dumb. It was dumb. So, all that being said, I was making $8 an hour. They're working me less than 20 hours a week, coming home in pain every night. But I did it to prove to my wife, not every job is right, but I will do what it takes to make the family work. And in that meantime, I took everything, man. That's when I got to be a professional producer for a little while, and just fate and fortune brought me somebody who could afford to help me pay my bills and build them a show. I was hustling Lyft, came around during that time. They were not a thing before that. I was just doing everything, man. So any questions, any thoughts on that, or what do you guys got?
Yeah, I didn't fully understand what was going on when my family declared bankruptcy because, I was 11 or 12. And my parents, they never really talked about finances other than we don't have money. That was all it ever was we don't have money. I'm like, oh, okay. And so I never got an education on how to balance a budget or anything like that from my parents.
Yeah.
And so when we declared bankruptcy, the little snippets that I did get from my parents were a large portion of the cause, at least that they claimed, was one of my dad's employees was stealing from us, had embezzled. I think they had attributed it to like 100,000 or 200,000, which for a small business is substantial.
Yeah.
My dad had a small automotive business at the time. And so that was a large portion of it. So we were behind in mortgage payment and everything. We filed for bankruptcy and we went house hunting, and regardless of what we were trying to do, no one was going to give us a loan. Like, we just declared bankruptcy. You're not going to get a loan. And so that actually facilitated our family moving from Washington State to Pennsylvania, because my grandpa basically gave us the house my dad grew up in. So we made payments to my grandpa for the house. I don't know if it still had a mortgage on it or if we were just making rent payments. I don't actually know the details of it. And my grandpa moved in with my uncle in this huge house. It was like a 4-story house plus a basement. So yeah, it was ginormous. But yeah, so when my grandpa passed a few years later, the bulk of my dad's inheritance was the house. And so that ended up being a huge boon for us, was my grandpa's generosity. And I know a lot of people don't have
grandpas,
have family members that can help in situations like that. And so I've been very blessed in my life. Whenever I've had struggles, my in-laws are actually very generous with us, with helping us out and stuff like that. And so we do our best to pay them back and everything, but they have been very, very generous with us. So
yeah, I mean, my in-laws did the same. We'd go to so earlier on, dumb decisions being what they are. And this is what my wife and I have definitely discussed. We definitely want to be there for our kids. We want to help, but we've spent most of our kids' lives teaching them how to do better, how to have a strong work ethic, do what it takes to make the money you need, not get rich. And that's the only thing important, but focus and do that. And we definitely, one of the things that drives me to earn more money is to have that ability to, if they get into a spot, to say, hey, let me help you out, type of deal. Because her father used to give us money and she'd cry. Her mom gave us some money sometime to help us out. uh, I asked my mom for some money at one point, and that's all I heard for months is when you're going to pay it back, and just made it miserable. So I never asked them for money ever again. um, but I can tell you, perspective is everything. And when you lose a job, and at first I tried, that was my opportunity to try to chase my dream. I'd been working on building the podcast stuff and the digital media stuff, and been investing and going to conferences and meeting people, which has got me to the production job that I got. I got a golden parachute. Okay. I got about 2 or 3 months of finances, but we made a hard stop on that. Actually, I think our bills were like $2,000 a month at the time. So maybe 3. And so we got about 4 or 5 months, but I said, I'll have 2 months. I'll chase the dream. I'll get out there. I'll push it. I'll hustle. And then we got some income and that extended it out. But finally, by spring of 2014, I believe it was like, yeah, the hustle is just not going to cut it. And I had to do what was right for my family and find something. And ultimately, still, it led me to where I am today. I mean, that path took me directly to the EMT school and doing social media for them on the hustle and this and that, to then taking a full-time job because they were paying $10 an hour. It's like, hey, as long as you let me, and he goes, man, it's only $10 an hour. You're worth way more than that. It's like, oh, I know. However, I live a life on the hustle. And for 2 years, here's how my wife described me to our kids' moms, your kids' friends' moms, right? In kindergarten, first grade. Oh, what did your husband do? She finally went, I don't know. He tells people to pay him and they do. I went, that's the best thing anybody's ever said about me. She's regretted it every day. Like, no, I love that truth. That's great. Because she just didn't understand all the hustles and stuff I was doing. But yeah, it's rough, and I'm glad the one choice I know 100% that I made was correct. About 2 or 3 months before we filed bankruptcy, we knew there was a potential that the job would go away, because they'd always said, originally I lost my job in 2010 because they sold to a new company. That company shut down our building, but because me and 2 other people were so good at what we did and their people were not, we got retained at a decent rate to work from home. And when I say a decent rate, there were days when it was like I wouldn't go to family holidays for 2 or 3 years because I got paid $50 an hour on Thanksgiving Day to just sit there and answer phones from doctors and finish up the 2 calls that were in there and play video games all day, just waiting because they wanted somebody to wait. But with the way they stacked it, it's $50 an hour.
Damn
and my
right.
wife told the family, is like, yeah, you guys can miss him all you want, but we need that. So we stockpiled. We did what we could. But my wife had said to me one night, she was like, look, you just need to quit your job and chase the podcasting thing. And I think we knew that doom was coming, and that's her response to impending doom. Let's just rip the Band-Aid. Let's just die right now. And like, no, I'm not going to do it. And sure enough, around Christmas time, so I got laid off September-ish. So around Christmas time, she just hit bottom. And I mean, she's throwing things, she's crying, she knows she's going to lose her house. And later on, after we talked it out and brought her back up, I was like, that moment is exactly what I needed, because it showed me I made the right decision. Because no matter what we do, no matter how hard this gets, there's no thoughts from myself first or anybody else outside of me going, you made this decision and you did this to your family. So I didn't. I just wrote it until they laid me off. And it was a word. And this is true. Random Kid says, anyone who says whatever job, X job is beneath them are idiots. 100%, man.
I would like to actually challenge that. I don't believe they're idiots. I believe they're not desperate enough. And because they've
hungry enough, yeah.
Because they've not. Because here's another weird controversial thing. Everybody complains about a lot of things, and that's partially because life is actually pretty good.
Yes.
And
Ever heard of a thing called first world problems?
well, so I'm even willing to say that it's not first world problems, but life's not that bad. And even for most people who complain the most, that caveat in particular, that complain the most, life is still pretty good. And so so it's hard. I will tell you that a year after I got married, I lost my job because my company went out of business because my best friend, who was the owner of the company, got cancer and died.
Oof.
So I lost that job. I could not get a job at McDonald's, and I had proved
Right.
and this was 1989. So 1989, 1990, and at that point, I was a couple of years into the video game industry. I sent resumes out by mail because it was 1989 to 45 video game companies.
So all of them in 1989.
All of them that I could find. All of them that I could find. No bites, no bites, no bites. Couldn't get a job at McDonald's. And I had worked at Burger King in high school, and I said, I'm never doing fast food again.
And yet you were like,
I had to, right? I couldn't pay my rent, which for the apartment, which was also owned by my best friend who owned the company that had to lay me off. So they went without rent for a couple of months or so. 6 months after I sent out the resume, I got a call from a company 3,000 miles away that said, hey, do you want to come out here for an interview? At which point I said, yes, without even missing a beat. And they said,
were they paying for your travel, or
yes,
just figure that out? Okay.
Yeah, no, they knew where I was. And so they flew me out and they said, oh, can you start in 2 weeks? I said, yes, I can. And so I flew back. I had a Chevy Sprint, a 3-cylinder hatchback car. And it did 50 miles to the gallon because it was a regular fuel efficient car, but it was a 3-cylinder Suzuki engine. And my wife and I, because my wife had been laid off that year as well, my wife and I piled as much stuff into that little hatchback that we could. And it was my TV, a folding card table, our pillows, and our clothes. That's all we had room for. And so we get in the car, we drive cross country. At that point, we were buying groceries with gas station credit cards.
Oof.
And so literally lived on Chevron gas station credit cards cross country. We'd get fuel and we'd buy our meals for the day. And then we'd keep going. Stay at a little Motel 6 or something, whatever the cheapest thing we could find, and drove cross country. Now, the company that I was working for happened to have a company apartment. They let us stay there for the first 2 weeks till I got my pay to put a down payment on an apartment. And then for another 6 months, no couch, no bed. I bought a couple of inflatable pool rafts.
Wow. All right.
For a bed. Until somebody at the office said, hey, I'm throwing away this sleeper sofa. Do you want it? And I said, yes. And so we got that. It was ugly and it was bad. But I tell you what, it shows you what you're willing to do to just keep things going.
Yeah.
And so you will live on macaroni and cheese, 5 for $1 boxes. You know, if ramen really existed back then, I would be a ramen expert right now.
Oh yeah, we were ramen kings for sure.
But it was good because it taught me independence. And my dad often would complain about that.
You're too independent?
because my brother and my sister for years would go to mom and dad to help solve their problems for them, and not just financial, but like go, and live with them because they didn't want to find an apartment or whatever. It was a way different situation, and I was like going, we are 3,000 miles away. You can't help us, so we got to figure this out. And we did, and we became stronger for it. But yeah, you do what you got to do. There is no job beneath anybody. If you're desperate enough.
Well, I love that you talked about what you learned, because I learned a few things as well. I kind of flipped into what would be traditionally called dad mode. Like I started realizing how many lights we left on in the house, how many fans, how many things, how much money we were burning. So I did start playing with the thermostat, so we were comfortable with making sure it was right. And a lot of these traditional dad things were really, I'm growing up and not being a dad or the man or whatever. I'm going, money matters. And we really started planning things. But so I became wiser and smarter with my money. I learned that. I learned a lot of things. And random kid said something about in his experience, the poor, here it is. In my experience, the poorest people tend to be the most generous people. That's important. And that is something I definitely lived in during that time, was never going, I can't. I was, gripping that little bit of money left and starving. My wife and I still found ways to donate our time to soup kitchens or those kind of things, to help other people work with that. I tithe, and not because I believe in bribing God or that I have to, but it was the easiest way, being in the South and preacher's kid growing up in churches. It was the easiest way I knew to keep a flow of money. Because as you're doing things, it's a somebody a spiritual thing, but I think it's an energy, mental perception thing of, I'm giving to help somebody else. I'm putting out good energy, and I'm not going, I'm paying my bills. Oh, this hurts. Or, there was negative money in my life, and then there was this positive. How can I help people? And that kept our heads above water. And as far as emotions go, then I'll tell you, the biggest thing I learned is how stupid people are who don't, and they just don't want to listen. But that some version of Random Kiss is, I love the conversation. We have time for the rest of the show. We're gonna find out. Just buckle up, Buttercup. But the biggest thing that I learned is, you have to say what you want. And when we started looking for a house or a place to live, that was where I could go to work and those kind of things. And we tried this and we tried that one, because we knew we could afford $850 a month. That's what we were paying on our house before they jacked it up to like 9 something. And then with gas and everything else, it was just undoable. But we knew if we moved somewhere, we could afford up to $850 a month. So we're checking all these houses, finding stuff. But every time we found one we thought we liked, of course I said, I'd talk to the lender or talk to whoever and say, hey, no kidding, Random Kid, it would be a steal. I pay less than that right now to live in my house, but that's a whole different story, and to help a family. But I'd say, hey, I'm filing bankruptcy, and they would panic. Well, you could just bail this apart. No, that's not how it works. The second I file bankruptcy, I cannot put anything else into it, period. And if I go and buy stupid stuff like Kurt, I know you didn't get to this part, but if you get all the way through the process, you go to court. It's not a judge. It's like a lawyer that's an adjudicator, and they know the bankruptcy laws or whatever. But that's all it is bankruptcy court. So overhearing lawyers talk to people, and everyone like, they're trying to whisper like, are you kidding me? You bought 2, at this time it was the largest screen on the market, 250-inch TVs. What? I told you, do not spend any more. I was just cracking up. So you can't go get more debt. You can't go buy something. Nice. They do a 3-year look back, by the way, and a 6 months monitoring process before it gets finalized to make sure you're not trying to rip off people in the right way. And so, but these people didn't understand that. And Joe apparently is not proud of his 1%er status, but that's okay. Because he didn't have these stories like we do, Kurt. That's okay. But finally, my wife said, I just want some good old boy who won't care, just wants his money, let us pay our rent and leave us alone. And that's what we got. And I won't go into all the long stories, But that had its own set of problems because we exactly got a good old boy who just cared about his rent and left us alone, and it was a problem. But not a bit. It was a lesser problem than not having a place to live.
Right.
We dealt with it. So all that being said, that's a great topic.